Okay, let's get started. Hi, everyone. If you don't know, I'm Adam Fritz. I'm the CEO of Pozotron, and I am very, very pleased to be joined by David H. Lawrence the 17th and George the Tech Whittam today for this really exciting webinar celebrating Audiobook Month. June is Audiobook Month, I believe, is the official term. So today we're going to be discussing how to harness technology in audiobooks and discuss some key trends that you should know. Our order of speaking today, you're unfortunately going to have to hear from me for a few minutes talking about just more globally the audiobook industry outlook, and then some different technology and how Pozotron views technology in audiobooks. That's going to be as brief as possible. And then you're going to have the opportunity to hear from George and then from David. Just a reminder, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. For each of them, they're going to answer their questions or at the end of their speaking time. So please use that Q&A box. Without further ado, I'm just going to give a little bit of general information about where the audiobook industry is going. Most of it is very, very, very good news for all of us who all have some role in audiobook production. So at the macro level, I believe the industry has grown double digits or very close to double digits for 20 years consecutively. But the stats that I was looking at, an average of 18.7% annual growth over the past 10 years. That's in terms of sales revenues. And from 2014 to 2023, annual sales for audiobooks have increased almost 5x, which is a lot. So bottom line, audiobook industry is a very, very, very good place to be because it is growing. It is growing very, very strong. One thing I also get, we get a lot of questions at our company about the impact of the macroeconomic trends, recessions, and that kind of thing. And my take on it is we're quite recession-proof for a couple of reasons. One interesting thing about macroeconomic trends is one of the industries that does best during times of economic downturn is actually women's cosmetics. And that is because it is an affordable luxury. You may not be able in rougher economic times, you may not be able to go afford a trip to Hawaii. You can definitely afford, $15 or $20 on a new lipstick. Audiobooks are the same thing. You may not be able to afford a big, big extravagant expenditure. You can probably afford a $15 Audible subscription. And it brings you that affordable feeling of whether it's luxury or fun or enjoyment. It's an affordable luxury. So my take is that the audiobook industry is luckily quite recession-proof, which is excellent news for all of us. Another thing is that audiobooks are very, very, very heavily driven by English content, but non-English content is growing significantly. So 2022 versus 2023, just in US alone, saw a 35.7% year-over-year growth in non-English sales. And then if you look at different markets, Northern and Western Europe specifically are absolutely exploding. And if I look at our customer base, we've seen massive increases in European, South American, and Asian publishers working with us specifically, just because of the massive growth in non-English audiobooks specifically. Fiction sales are still driving a massive percentage of audiobooks. So since 2014, fiction sales represent just about almost exactly 2/3 of audiobook revenues. And my apologies, David is going to go first, not George. I got that backwards. Fiction sales do drive a significant portion of revenues, but you have seen back in 2014, it was about 75% fiction, and we're closer to 60% fiction now. So nonfiction is driving a bigger portion of the sales pie. And best news for all of us is there is a ton, even though the industry is growing significantly, there is a ton of room for growth. So only 52% of US adults have ever listened to an audiobook. So literally half of the of the intended potential audience has never listened to an audiobook, which shows there's a lot of opportunity to grow beyond where we're at. And only 38% of US adults listened to an audiobook last year. And about 52%, I think it was about 50%. These are all stats from the Audio Publishers Association, the APA. One more thing is that of that 52% of US adults who have ever listened to an audiobook, half of those have played an audiobook for their children. My kids are massive audiobook fans. It gets me through all of the long drives between baseball and hockey tournaments and things like that. And so, if kids now are getting hooked on audiobooks, that's a real long-term opportunity for the whole industry. Just one question we're getting just before I go further. This webinar will be recorded, and we will post it to our YouTube channel and send out the recording to everyone who's registered as well. So you will be able to view it on demand as well. Okay, so I've given you a lot of good news. How's the best way to put this? It's not a bad thing, but the sobering, thank you, George. Currently, this is posted on ACX's website. There are currently 1,584 titles open for auditions as of 20 minutes ago. There are 317,264 narrators with an active sample on their profile. There's actually listed 1.684 million producers on ACX in terms of people who are involved in the process at some point. So just based on the number of narrators with an active sample, that is 200 narrators on the platform for every open audition. There are currently 320,901 individual audiobooks on sale on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes. Again, these are from ACX. That is just more than one on-sale audiobook for every active narrator on ACX. So what I would say is, while there is a ton of current growth and huge opportunity to continue growing, there's also a lot of competition out there. So it is incumbent on narrators, or my advice for narrators would be continue to get better and better and better at your craft. And that involves coaching, like David offers, to get better at the acting performance side of things, but then also improve all of your technical skills, either your technical skills, or improve your knowledge of all the tools that are available to you, so you can get better and better and better at your craft. I'm going to touch very briefly on everyone's favorite subject, and that's AI. First of all, what is AI? An AI is simply a tool designed by humans using algorithms and machine learning to accomplish a task. Full stop. Just because something is AI does not mean it's by definition evil, or by definition designed to replace you in a production process or something like that. There are two general types of AI. Narrow AI is something designed to accomplish a specific task. So Pozotron is a great example. It is a very specific task that we are looking to automate or improve through AI. General AI is the idea that a tool can be done for everything. So ChatGPT is a great example of general AI. It can do a ton of different things using the same sort of techniques. And there are also 4 different definitions or types of AI. Important to note that only the first 2 actually exist currently. The other 2 are just theoretical. So reactive machine AI are AI systems that have no memory and are task specific. So for example, the IBM chess games that first came out. Limited memory AI imitates the way our brain's neurons work together, meaning that the more data it gets, the more we train on it, the smarter it gets and the better it gets. So a good example there is a self-driving car. ChatGPT is another example. And in theory, Pozotron has elements of limited memory AI as well. The next 2 are theoretical. Theory of mind AI is essentially an AI that, beyond just limited memory, has the potential to understand the world and how other entities have thoughts and emotions. And then this entity learns how to behave based on the predicted response of the people the things it is interacting with. And then finally, self-aware AI understands their state of being and then being able to sense or predict others' responses to the way they act. So for example, just thinking I'm hungry becomes I know I am hungry, and then the next one is I want to eat lasagna because I'm hungry and it is my favorite food. So that's where, I've got the picture of the Terminator there. that is where AI becomes what everyone immediately thinks of when they think of AI, which is that self-aware version of AI. I think the most important distinction in the way people use AI, because AI is just a tool designed by humans to accomplish a task, is whether Pozotron, for example, we look at AI as an ability to enhance human performance, whereas some uses of AI are designed to replace human performance. So I just wanted to touch on very specifically, Pozotron very much believes in the enhancement, not the replacement. So Pozotron's technology. So we are a software company with an AI-powered software suite that cuts hours from the audiobook, voiceover, and scripted audio production process by automating the manual tasks to allow humans to do the creative, performative elements that I believe are an innately human endeavor. So we believe in the power of technology to make humans more efficient, accurate, and effective, not to replace them. So that's just very, very important that we want to hammer on. And then finally, we do not use your data to create an AI likeness of your voice, sell or share your data to any third parties, or replace human proofers or editors with software. That is not what it is intended to do. And quite frankly, our tool doesn't work without that human interaction. So without further ado, I'm actually going to go into David's introduction first. So I'd like to welcome David H. Lawrence the 17th. After 36 years in morning radio, David has been seen on camera or heard on screen in Cars 3, The People vs. OJ, Lost, How I Met Your Mother, The Bold and the Beautiful, The Mentalist, CSI, Chuck, Good Luck Charlie, and as the creepy evil puppet master Eric Doyle on NBC's Heroes. David is Backstage's Reader's Choice favorite voiceover teacher with his voheroes.com and acxmasterclass.com courses. And in addition to Audio Cupcake, which we will hear about later, he created the best-selling app for actors called Rehearsal Pro. So welcome, David, and thank you very much for joining us today. I would also like to introduce George the Tech Whittam. Since 2005, George has dedicated his career to serving the technical needs of voice actors and recording studio owners. He launched George the Tech in August 2017 to provide tech support, training, and studio design and audio processing templates for voiceover professionals. With extensive experience in music, recording, and broadcast engineering, George is now a globally recognized authority in voiceover recording technology. George, thank you very much for joining us today. Before I pass it over to David, I do just want to remind everyone that for attending today, you will be getting some free giveaways, which is in recognition for you spending your time with us and also for being if not a client, then for sure a customer, a friend of Pozotron. And hopefully you will do the same with David and George, because I can say, as I've had relationships with both of them for quite some time at this point. And I say both of them are excellent at their jobs and will provide significant value to you regardless of what role you have in the audiobook industry. So you will be getting 2 hours of free proofing credits for the Pozotron proofing tool, a $30 credit for the George the Tech webinar recording library, including future live webinars, courtesy of George the Tech Whittam. A free copy of Audio Cupcake Premium, courtesy of David H. Lawrence the 17th, as well as 2 hours of private coaching for anyone who signs up for the upcoming 2024 ACX Masterclass with David H. Lawrence the 17th and Dan O'Day. So you will get an email very soon, right after this webinar, on how to claim those. But please take advantage of those, because I can promise it will make you better at your jobs. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to David, and I'm going to stop talking. So, David, thank you very much.
Yeah. Am I able to share? I think I am.
Should be able to now. I've just stopped.
This is awesome. All right. And I just want to point out that the coaching will be, if you decide to join the ACX Masterclass, the coaching will be with me, not Dan. So you don't have to worry your little head about that kind of stress. The ACX Masterclass is responsible for about 6,000, the graduates of the class are responsible for about 6,000 of those 300 and some odd thousand books that have come out of ACX since it was in inception in 2011. And what I want to share with you today, is a series of things that you probably don't need to worry about, but you might think you do when you're first starting off, and also a few things that you might want to consider instead. And don't think that I went to all of the off-putting Facebook groups and started looking at the questions and comments and criticisms that you find in those groups and drew my list from that. That didn't happen. This is actually stuff that people ask all the time when they're just getting started and they're worried about things like keeping their voice constant from chapter to chapter and having stamina to be able to do a 20-hour audiobook, things like that. But here are some of the things that you probably don't need to worry about in no particular order except in the process. I try to put them in the order of the process that we use. And then I promise I'm going to give you some stuff that you should be concerned about. First of all, spending a ton of money on your first microphone is bad. It's just bad. Mostly because the space in which you're going to be recording as you're first starting off might be so loud that that microphone makes things worse. And so then you think, oh, well, I need to buy a Studio Bricks or some other expensive booth. I wouldn't spend money on that either. I would start with a great microphone. We recommend one that costs about $100 currently. And you're like, what? It is a USB microphone? Is that what it is? Yeah, it is, actually. It's a unicorn, but it's a USB microphone. And it's the same one that I use. I recommend to people the equipment that I use on a daily basis. And I've done, and there's many people here that have done more than me, but I've done close to 300 books at this point. You don't need a Studio Bricks. You need a nice quiet space to get started, and that's it. Don't start setting aside huge funds for that. Demonizing rights holders. We start to hear people talking about these awful authors and writers and publishers and producers, and it's like, you know what? They're our family. They're our clients. They're our, we give care to them. We take care of their babies. Try not to do that. Try not to fall into that as a way to air your grievances. Annotating your manuscripts. I have people ask me all the time, how do you mark up your script? And I say, I don't. Because for me, annotating your manuscript can become an obsession. It can become a blood sport. And it also becomes another layer of interpretation that you have to take a look at as you narrate your book. Why did I circle that? Was it because I had to research it? Because I wanted to emphasize it? Because I wanted to pronounce it a certain way? Because I wanted to do something? Annotating your manuscript can be a really dark, deep hole. I don't do anything other than make a mark where I stop so I can find it later when I want to pick up my recording. Complex work to finished hours time tracking systems. I get that many of us are left-brained, many of us are right-brained, some of us are right-brains trapped in a left-brain body and vice versa. And you want to know the metrics of your business, for sure. And we even provide in the ACX Masterclass a Google Sheet that lets you do exactly what I'm warning you not to get too obsessed about, only so that you can figure out, am I spending way too much time per finished hour? What is my, ratio, and so on? We're very proud of the fact that for those of you that are spending double-digit hours on your books and you're not taking advantage of tools that save you time, like Pozotron, most of our graduates are not in the 7 to 15 hour range, but rather the 2 to 4 hour range per finished hour, and that includes everything. And part of that is the stair-step method that we teach, the way we help you set things up, the way we walk you through the process. And, we are also very proud of the audio winners that we have that use the process that we teach. But getting really down a rabbit hole on keeping track of your finished hours ratio can be an issue. So be careful about that. Complicated vocal warm-ups. I get this question all the time. What's your warm-up before you start doing your audiobook work? And mine is this. And that's it. And that drives music teachers and voice teachers crazy. They say, never clear your throat. But that's my warm-up. And that's me. That doesn't mean it might be you, but what I want to warn you about is spending, half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour doing scales, doing trills, doing blowing on a straw, things like that. Be careful, because that can become an obsession as well and probably isn't necessary. Now, having said that, One other thing that you want to avoid is getting all of the other narrators that you know of suggestions on stamping out mouth noise. Either stopping or adding to the amount of saliva that you produce, because everybody's body is different. Talk to any speech therapist, any otorhinolaryngologist, and they will tell you that everybody's body is different, and one person's green apple solution can make another person a little nutty with too much saliva. So be careful about gathering suggestions and, in general, stamping out mouth noise. I think sometimes we're our own worst enemies when we listen to our recordings and we think we hear egregious mouth noise and clicks. And I urge you to go to audible.com and listen to the samples for things like breaths and for mouth noise of your favorite narrators. Listen to their audio samples. Do it on the website, because now on the app, if you want to listen to the sample, you're going to hear the first 5 minutes of the book. You can do it that way if you want, but you'll find that there's a lot more mouth noise out there than you think, and that kind of leads you to conclude, if you choose to, that maybe it's not the problem that you think it is. And I have my own personal feeling about the plugins that are sold that help you do that, because it can alter the qualities of your voice and take away some of the drama and the options in your acting that you could be able to use. So be careful about obsessing about stamping out mouth noise. And find something, if you need to do something about your saliva or about your mouth clicking or your palate separation, your tongue palate separation, that works for you. That's something to do. We'll get into a couple of things. Complaining about insane pickup lists and lots of pickups, wrong pickups. Your job is to judge what you get back from people. I was doing a book that took place in the Northeast, and I know that we have an attendee. One of my clients is attending today, Mary Zajac, and when I told her about this yesterday, I was going along narrating the book, and I said, and as DJ drove to Woburn, Massachusetts, and my director stopped me and said, "Yeah, that's Woburn." And I'll just leave it to those of you who are Boston residents to see how that turned out when we called the Woburn Library. But when you're looking at a list of pickups, the list of pickups is a series of suggestions. And complaining about a long list of pickups is fruitless. You want to go through these things and get rid of the ones that you don't agree with, or push back on the ones you don't agree with. But there's no sense in complaining about it, because it really isn't an onerous situation. It's an opportunity for you to grow, and it's an opportunity for you to learn what others are perceiving about your narration. So look at it that way. What do you think? And then being precious about meeting audio standards. I had somebody post, Audio Cupcake simply solves the math problem, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Meeting RMS and peak normalization standards for ACX is required, and passing those standards using either the ACX check plugin or second opinion is suggested. But it's not a piece of artwork. It's a math problem. That's it. There's no gentle adjustment of filtering and stuff to achieve that. It's a math problem that is applied to the waveform, period. Now your presentation, your style, your sound on your microphone, any of the chains that George might design for you, yeah, those are pieces of art. Those are choices that you want to make about your sound. But I had somebody post a comment below, talking about how Audio Cupcake works, saying, "Oh no, you have to be very careful about how you perfectly dial in and judge whether or not your standards are being met." No, that's not how it works, actually. So let's get to a few things that you might want to consider more deeply, that sometimes are avoided, and some of them tie into what I've been talking about. The first one is sticking with a microphone that works for you, and then getting better as a performer using that microphone. Before you start going out and spending tons of money and gathering medals for how many microphones you buy from Sweetwater and from all the other vendors out there, and criticizing the sound of the microphone because my voice is unique. A lot of people have done this work long before we all showed up, and have done so with really great enjoyment and success, and not walked into a studio and said, TLM 103. What? Come on. Be careful about dropping into that kind of mode of criticism, because it's you. It's not the microphone in the relationship. It's you. It really is. And sticking with a microphone that works, I use the AT2020. I have a Neumann U87. I have a Sennheiser on the shelf. They're both in their box. I haven't used them in over a decade, and I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing okay. And you can do better, do what you want, but get better as a performer. Concentrate on that, not thinking that changing the microphone is going to make a huge difference in your life. Buy a Studio Bricks if you need it and you can afford triple walling it. Don't buy a single wall or a double wall, because you'll be very disappointed with the results, no matter where you live. If you can afford a triple wall, I have a building next door to me that is undergoing renovation. And so I bought a Studio Bricks, and I bought the VO Artist Plus, the Studio One Plus, triple walled. And it still doesn't stop everything. I live next to the 5 here in Los Angeles, and whenever there's an accident and there's a helicopter going by, it's an issue when it's right over my condo. So be careful. But do not skimp on the thickness of your booth, whatever it is. And it doesn't have to be a Studio Bricks, obviously, but don't do that. Consider the pickup lists, both in Pozotron, the things that you get back from human beings who don't use Pozotron, who do use Pozotron, who have their own methods. Consider them for what they are, not an intrusion in the quality of your life on a negative basis, not something that people are using as a weapon against you as a narrator, but for what they are, suggestions on doing better, on being more accurate, on being more understandable, on keeping people in the story. Because the moment that person from Boston, who would have heard me say Woburn, which is what my director wanted me to say, as opposed to Woburn, it would have taken them right out of what was a very dramatic story. What? And there goes the review on Audible about how I don't know what I'm talking about, and there you go. But just consider the pickup list for what it is, and have a conversation about it. It's a bunch of suggestions, and if it's Pozotron, it's usually pretty good ones. So caring deeply for your rights holders as opposed to criticizing them or looking at them as an intrusion, or if you're in the service business, which is what we are, and you look at your customers as an interruption in your day and a group of enemies that will hurt you, that's not the way to look at it. If that's how it is for you, consider getting some guidance on how your feelings are affecting your progress. These are their babies. They've worked on this stuff for a long time. Their timeline is very different from our timeline as voice talent. And these are their babies. These are the things that they've crafted and birthed, and we're basically like taking pictures of them and presenting those pictures. So care deeply about that. Figure out how you can care more deeply about that. Again, treat RMS and peak normalization as math, not as art. And we're going to give you a tool that helps you do that, which I so thank George for liking and enjoying and being a supporter of. Finally, all of these things that I've told you, these are the things that work for me, and in many cases for my clients, for the people that I teach in my courses and the people that I coach when I do private coaching. But in general, I want you to remember that above all, you're an actor. You do you, boo. You're an actor. Choose the path that works for you. What I presented for you here today are guidelines that have worked for me. Just like, I talked about, finding the way you fix your saliva is what works for you. These are things that I found to be productive and less destructive in my life, and hopefully that's the case for you as well. So with that, now we had talked yesterday about taking questions after George speaks as well. So you tell me what you want to do, Adam. I'm fine with whatever you want to do.
Sounds good. I think we don't have any questions yet, but we will. Does anyone have any questions for David? If anything comes up during George's presentation, feel free to ask those in the Q&A box as well. Really, I believe we're all pretty open book. So if you have any questions, please ask them. Otherwise, we will move on to George Whittam.
All right, sounds good. Hey, everybody.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, David. Yeah. David and I are sharing the stage for the first time in a long time. We shared the stage many, many years ago at SAG, and it's fun to do it again.
Yeah.
And so we know how each other think and teach and what we prioritize, and which is great, which is why I wanted to go second. So David's really great at boiling it down to what the essences are that are really important. And that's because he's an actor and he has an actor's brain, and he also has the technical side, but he understands actors really well. And he knows that the technical side can be very intimidating and really slow you down and bog you down, right? So a lot of what I'm going to talk about is maybe next level thinking, like after you've learned ACX Masterclass, or maybe you've gone through a book or two or three, and you're like, okay, I'm comfortable with this. I'm comfortable with voice acting. I'm comfortable with narrating. I have a workflow. I'm getting a groove at this. Well, what can I do next? What are some other things to level up? And that's kind of what I am leaning towards today with this, is really about things that we can do to level up once we have a really good system going. And by leveling up, I mean, what do I mean, right? Like, again, there's a lot of things that work fine that don't necessarily need improvement. But because I do come from audio engineering, I have a little bit pickier ear about what I want to hear in an audio file. And so a lot of what I'm talking about now comes from what I would say is the voice acting world, as not as much as the audiobook world. And many of these things you can pick and choose from as things you want to focus on to make improvements in your audio quality primarily, but also to other aspects. So some of the stuff I thought I would talk about today would just be, it's just some recording best practices that I recommend everybody apply to their recording process. Some things about acoustics that David touched on briefly, but getting a little bit more about understanding what acoustics is all about. What does it mean? Is that soundproofing or not? Then we'll talk about noise, all the kinds of noise you deal with, what noises are truly acceptable and tolerable. And I'm so glad David touched on mouth noise and how oftentimes it's obsessed over. And I'll talk about that a little. And then maybe we'll talk about a little bit about ergonomics, just about creating a recording environment that works for you, that you're happy being in and sustaining for long periods of time, because audiobooks tend to be long. So we want to have a process that's comfortable and nice to work in. So just best practices stuff. And these are all things that are, I would say, mostly negotiable, but all things that I've found to be helpful in getting great audio and a great production. So I always start my recording projects and recommend recording nowadays in 24-bit, 44.1 kilohertz wave files. In a lot of ways, 24-bit quality would be considered overkill, because we've been listening to 16-bit audio on CDs since the 80s. Most people would agree a CD sounds fine, right? Why 24-bit? The reason why I prefer it is because it does allow you to record at a much lower average volume, nowhere near zero, a much lower level, without any concern of loss of actual quality, fidelity, dynamic range, or anything. And why that's nice is because we stress out a lot less about setting those recording levels. And that is something that people can really obsess over, is trying to figure out what recording level to set your equipment. So 24-bit takes a lot of that pressure off, because you can record at lower levels. And because the whole process of setting your levels to meet the standards happens much later on in the process, don't be concerned about your raw audio sounding and looking like a full volume audio file. It doesn't need to be. Give yourself plenty of headroom, which is the room between how loud you get and the volume you can get at 0 dB. That's the headroom. Always make sure you're capturing some room tone. So like every chapter, maybe not every chapter, that's probably overkill, but you're going to always have some room tone, but you want to have a room tone file for each book that you do. I recommend that because you will find that later on in the editing process, in my ways of doing things, you will use that room tone for a lot of different things. You'll use it for setting the intervals of pauses at the start and the end of chapters. You'll use it to replace other things that you don't want to have heard in your file, like a weird breath or a very prominent mouth noise or a mouth smack. You'll want to just replace that with room tone. Much, much better than muting the audio. So you want to have some room tone. Now, again, levels. Your levels can peak, meaning the loudest the recording ever reaches can stay below 6 dB with no concern of loss of fidelity. So don't worry about that. And you'll really need to pick a spot in the script. You'll have to have some familiarity with the script you're going to read, because you'll need to find where in the script the character may, if it's character-based anyway, or fictional, where the character can get very high in energy. So you need to figure out what that is, record a test, set the level, and then you forget it. I mean, you could write it down, but I mean, set it and leave it there. Don't change levels throughout the project, because I find it's very difficult later on to sort out what's going on if you do that. Just be consistent, whatever that is you do. Be really consistent with your mic placement. Make sure that the mic technique you're using, David teaches a very particular technique with the Audio-Technica mic, or if maybe you're using, this is also an Audio-Technica mic, but this is a shotgun mic. This is the 875R, another awesome budget microphone from Audio-Technica. Whatever that mic technique is, be consistent. Be really consistent with where you place it, where you put your copy, and because where you put your copy is where you're going to look. And so once you know where your copy is and where you look, then you can put the mic in the right spot and basically lock it down. You don't want that to move too much, because you want to keep that consistency all the time. It's going to make your editing and post go so much better. Definitely learn some breath control. If you have a tendency to insert breaths in mid-sentence or mid-phrase a lot because you become short of breath, or if you use big gasping breath technique as a way to suck up a lot of air and try to get through a longer line of copy, whatever those techniques are, find one that works for you based on your physical ability, based on your energy level and things like that, and master it, because people think that you can just apply a plugin or a process to fix all your breaths. It ain't so, kids. It might be coming. AI is changing a lot of things. But for now, breath control is something you do literally through your acting process. And the last thing you should be doing is going through and vacuuming, eliminating, deleting, whatever, all of the breaths from your project. You know, you want to control that from your performance. It's part of your acting. And lastly, and I don't know why this should be said, but I'm going to anyway, don't change locations mid-book at all. If you can at all avoid it. You change locations and everything we talked about, consistency, mic placement, noise levels, all this stuff is going to go out the window. And it's going to be really hard to keep that project going with consistency of quality and everything else if you have to change location. So if you're going to go on vacation and you know you have to start a book, you have to look at the deadlines, all that stuff, and either wait till you get back or pause halfway through or whenever and pick it up when you get back. I know so many voice actors are obsessed with their travel kits and the things they take with them on the road and stuff. That's not you as an audiobook narrator. That should not be you. Don't put that pressure on yourself to try to do that. I always call recording from the road the black belt of recording. It's much more challenging to do it well. Now, acoustics. What is acoustics, first of all? Acoustics is just the way the environment around you responds to your voice, and then on the other side of that, how the microphone hears your voice in that environment. That environment around you is the acoustic environment. So your voice bouncing off the table, the desk in front of you, your computer screen, the window of your studio bricks door that's a huge piece of glass, all the different things in your environment that you have to think about, all that is part of the acoustics, right? So there's four main things that are going on acoustically that you're trying to correct and deal with to get the clearest signal from your mouth to your mic with the least amount of coloration, distortion, and things like that. So the first thing is what we call early reflections, and we want to try to eliminate those. What's an early reflection? That's just a flat surface close to your mic that's taking your voice and reflecting it right back into the mic. That's an early reflection. So that could be the desk right below your mic. Let's say your mic is on a desk stand and it's right over your desk. That's the desk below. Throwing a towel over the desk can fix that problem very easily. Next, it could be the wall that's immediately to the left, right, or behind your mic. If there's a flat, hard surface immediately adjacent to your mic within a couple of feet, that is another place for sound to bounce and return to the microphone. What all these early reflections cause are something I basically call resonances. Those are the sounds that create the audio files that are sometimes described as, I sound like I'm in a tube. I sound like I'm in a box. I sound boxy, etc. That's all of those reflections bouncing off one thing and returning back to the microphone. The sound of your voice is now going into the mic in several different variations. The one that goes directly in, the one that gets bounced off the desk, the one that goes off the wall. All of those are reaching the mic a millisecond away from each other in time. And all those sounds layering together is what creates that hollow, boxy sound that people sometimes associate with being inside a closet or a booth. So we want to get rid of those reflections. Another thing we want to do is try to get rid of any boominess or bass heaviness in our environment. When you're in a small space, they tend to build up more low frequency sound. And this is going to be much more of a problem for the big voiced narrators out there who have a lot of low frequency in their voice. They are going to have the most trouble because their booth is going to want to amplify those sounds naturally. They just do it by physics. The actual size of the room you're in is going to determine the frequencies that it's going to boom and resonate bass. So we want to try to get rid of the bass issues. Now, you can also just do this with a very simple equalizer setting. Some microphones even have something called a high pass filter. It's a little switch on the mic that when engaged, it will make the microphone hear less of those bass frequencies. Remember, it's not about with audiobooks, it's not about capturing this incredible instrument in every frequency in absolute purity and recreating it as accurately as possible. That is not the goal when you're recording a narration for an audiobook. The goal is intelligibility and clarity. Those are the goal. That's the goal you're trying to achieve. Now, we want to get fidelity so that your voice sounds pleasing, so they can hear the majority of what your voice sounds like. But we really want clarity. And those of you who have a bass-heavy voice, you tend to get a little bit, let's say you fall in love a little bit too much with that full bassy sound of your voice. And that's not what people need to hear. They need to hear clarity. It needs to sound clear when you're on a train with a pair of earbuds or in a car with a not so great car stereo. Your voice should still come through clearly. So getting rid of low end frequency helps. And the last thing that is going to plague everybody, and even me today in this space, I'm just in my parents' basement today where I'm traveling for the week with family. And it's a big open space. So here, I'm getting a little bit of reverb in this space. A little bit is okay. How much is too much reverb? That sound of the space around you, when it starts to distract the listener, right? So that's why it's helpful sometimes to have somebody else, like a coach, a trusted friend, or somebody else, even just a family member, listen to the audio you're recording on their favorite headphones or their AirPods or whatever, and ask, does this sound clear to you? Does it sound distracting to you? what do you think of the way I sound? Because that amount of reverb in the room, while it can be occasionally disruptive, even if it's there, it's not going to take someone out of the moment unless it's too extreme. And the thing is, these aren't numbers we can give you. And this is why ACX specs don't include any information about acoustics, because we just can't put numbers on these things. It is definitely a know it when I hear it kind of situation. And so one of the things I'm going to offer you guys later when you go to my landing page that will have all the information about our offers today is something called a sound check. And I will listen to your audio and let you know if you have no other people you trust. You can trust me to give you feedback about the audio you're recording so you know if the quality should be is where it should be or could be. So now we'll talk about noise, and the amount of noise you're going to deal with is going to depend completely on where you choose to live, where you have to live, and what's going on around you in your environment, And of course, noise isn't noise, right? Noises have all kinds of different qualities to them, intensities, frequencies, patterns, no patterns, etc., right? So we have to deal with noise however we choose to do it, right? There are some noises that you can have some control over, quote unquote, at the source, right? First of all, if you have a noise outside and you close your window, what happens? That noise is reduced. Depends on your windows. It depends on the noise. You can reduce it by some percentage, but it can be reduced. You want to reduce more noise, choose a room that has fewer windows or a room with no windows, which is why closets are so popular. Most closets have no windows. They're now creating another layer of wall and mass between you and the outside and creating another buffer to stop noise from getting in. But there are certain noise that I'm so glad that he'd pointed out that even if you invest in a $10,000 plus professionally built triple wall booth will still creep in. And those are tending to be mainly low frequency sounds, boomy sounds, droning sounds. Leaf blowers are our enemy, our arch enemy, because they drone. And the sound of those things tend to be right in the range of our voices, right? So those are things that have certain degrees of ability to stop, but certain sounds are so intense, so powerful that no matter, even if you spend all the money on the booth, are still going to be a part of your audio and will need to be fixed later. And there's a lot of ways to do that. Constant noises are the easiest really to fix, like a hiss or a hum, like a vibration from the refrigerator, things like that. It's very easy with processing to repair a lot of those sounds without detriment to the quality of your voice, right? Whenever we set up processing, and I set up processing for folks all the time to clean up their audio and make it sound as flattering as possible, I'm always balancing trying to remove noises and flaws with retaining the quality of somebody's voice. Once you start overdoing something to remove sound, you end up really having to backpedal to try to retain the quality of the voice. It's a delicate balance. So I try to be very careful not to destroy the voice, to just get rid of every little noise, right? Because a lot of noises, you may notice them in your environment, but the listener at the other end isn't going to hear. So not every noise is going to be a showstopper. And of course, we do have the ability nowadays to remove a lot of noises without much effort. When it's done correctly, it can be done very transparently. In fact, now we have tools, of course, using machine learning, AI, that literally will build a model of the way your voice sounds and then learn how to remove and separate your voice from the environment that you're in. All the different noises, the different impact sounds, all the random noises that happen, we can separate those out to the point where you can actually record an audiobook in a relatively noisy space and actually get a good sounding result. Now, it doesn't mean you want to record in a noisy space, because despite the fact that you can get good results, you're still going to deal with the distraction of being in a noisy space, and that's going to affect you and your performance. So keep all those things in mind. We'll talk a little bit about mouth noise. And David, again, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Don't obsess over mouth noise. I do have clients that do obsess over the little mouth noises. I just made one. I just heard it. What I've learned is that the mouth noise to the listener is almost always not noticed on first listen. Most people listen to an audiobook for a performance. They're getting caught in the story and they're hearing your performance. Mouth noises, little weird honks in your nasal passage, all the little things that voices do are going to be in that recording, and they're going to be audible for most people, but they aren't noticed. They aren't distracting. I'll keep using that word, distracting. So if you're really not sure, again, this is where the sound check comes in. If you're not sure of what the amount of noises that you're hearing in your audio are causing distraction or need to be fixed, have somebody else give it a listen and help you determine how much mouth noise really needs to be repaired, right? And David said, like, do not just go out there and just say, well, just eat a green apple. Everybody has different types of mouth noise and they all have different solutions. But basically, on a very general level, being hydrated is very important. Just have decent hydration. And stress is almost always a contributor to more mouth noise. It's just an autonomic response. Stress dries out and makes the saliva more sticky, and you make more mouth noise. So these are very simple things that you have some control over that you can do. Another thing is you should listen to more audiobooks. As David said, you really need to be very familiar with the medium you're producing. You should be listening to audiobooks. I've had occasional clients come to me and say, I was thinking of doing an audiobook. And I say, oh, which books do you like? I haven't really listened to any. That's not going to work. You have to be a listener and lover of the medium. Just like jazz musicians have hundreds of jazz CDs and albums and playlists on Spotify and stuff, you have to know the medium and listen to it a lot. And you'll notice the types of sounds that come through, the mouth noise, the breaths and things. But also, you'll notice that the fidelity of an audible audiobook is not nearly as high as a music album or a CD. In terms of the fidelity, the sound quality, especially at the high frequencies. So a lot of sounds that you may be hearing in your studio monitor headphones, that expose every little flaw in your voice, just get lost along the way through the mastering and through the compression, the intense data compression that's being done by Audible to take that 40-hour file and fit it onto your iPhone alongside 10 other books. It takes a lot of compression. And a lot of those subtle things they just disappear. They don't even make it. All that said, if you really want to look into some tools, there are many. And even Audacity now has a click removal tool. Now, it is not easy to use, and you can really mess up your audio by using it incorrectly, but at least they give you one. It's something. I find the tool in Adobe Audition to be a bit better and easier to use. It's certainly simpler. I think it's just called Automatic Declicker. And the big one that people really buy into, thanks to incredibly good marketing, is iZotope's RX, the RX plugin suite, which includes Mouth Declick. Only if you buy the standard version, not even the cheap version, but the more expensive standard version, you'll get Mouth Declick, which was really designed around removing or reducing mouth noise. Try it, demo it, and see if you think it's worth spending a lot of money for a plugin for that before you commit. Every single one of these plugins is available to demo and test, so don't commit. And one last company many people don't know about, but I like because they're affordable, is Acon Digital. They also make tools for removing noise and mouth noise. And last thing I'll talk about before we get to some Q&A is just ergonomics. Make sure you are in a very comfortable environment and position, body position. I love to get selfies of the actors who I'm evaluating. In fact, that's actually an instruction. If you get a sound check, and it's not because I'm not being creepy, I just want to see, where do you sit? Where is your mic? Where is your copy? What is this environment in which you're sitting and working in, or standing if you really want to stand? I want to see the whole thing, and I want to see it in just a selfie. Hold your phone out, get at the mic, look at your copy, and snap a photo. That's going to tell me a lot. The audio is a huge part of it, but if I see that picture, I can immediately know if some really basic stuff is out of whack. The mic is facing the wrong way. Surprisingly common problem, having the mic turned around backwards. If it's too far away, if your copy is too low, are you reading off your laptop screen and it's way down here? Now your throat's being closed off. All these things matter, and so I'll be able to give you feedback, but make sure your copy's in a place that's comfortable, your eye line's comfortable, and you can easily read it without the microphone's pop screen being partially obscuring the copy. No. If your mic has a huge pop screen or a big disc blocking your copy, it's not set up in the right way. You should be able to have the mic well out of your way. Make sure you have a great way to display and hold that copy that's stable and is consistent, right? Marking up copy. These days, because I haven't been in the art of acting in audiobooks for a while, I don't know what the most popular format or tool is for reading. But I do know that many, many people love reading off of an iPad or some sort of Android tablet that can work with a stylus or pencil, because the ability to make a quick adjustment, highlight something or correct something, put a little pair of glasses, like don't miss that word, whatever it is you need to do, being able to mark up things as you go can be extremely helpful, even if it's going to be on a screen. Also, you don't need to have one, but I do like to have a mic arm that's easy to adjust. If you find yourself getting uncomfortable in one position and you want to shift your body, you should be able to move your microphone to the same relative location to your mouth if you move. And having a mic on an arm that's easy to adjust is going to make that much, much easier. So ergonomics that make your life better. And lastly, and David, I believe you were doing this for some time, but you aren't anymore, is consider maybe a headset microphone. Now, this is
Just for radio, not for audiobooks.
Just for radio. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
The headset mic idea is something I've been tossing around my head for quite a long time. But it has a pro and a con. The pro of it is you put it on, you set the mic placement, and it stays there the whole project. You can physically move around. You can move your head, you can move your body, and the mic stays in the same place consistently. Another thing that's good about it is the mic is in a much closer proximity, so it tends to pick up less of the environment. It won't pick up as much reverb. It won't pick up as much room noise, right? And so those things can make your life a little bit easier because the mic is always in the right place, and you can stretch your back, relax, move around, and not have the sound change too much. The real downside is you no longer have the ability to control mic technique. And as you learn to become a great narrator, you learn how to work the microphone. If you want to be more intimate, evil, you get closer. If you want to get back and lean back from the mic to get more of the room when you're shouting, you can do that. With a headset mic, you can't. The mic is in a fixed place. So for some of you, it could be a game changer. If you have any kind of physical restriction, any kind of handicap or any issues, a headset mic is a game changer, right? There's a lot of reasons it can work, but it's also, remember, it's restrictive in a lot of ways. So those are the key points I wanted to chat about today with you guys. I appreciate you listening in. Hope you found that stuff helpful. And I hope there's some questions moreover than anything else, because that's why we're doing all this live, right?
We do have a couple questions. We're going to get to those right now. Thank you,
Awesome.
George, and thank you, David. Very, very much appreciated. And anyone, if you do have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. First question, this is specific to Mr. Lawrence. Could you do a quick, from Rebecca Davidson, would it be possible to have a quick overview of what the ACX Masterclass is and what you cover?
Sure. We look at the space of audiobooks as having hundreds of different ways to achieve the same goals. And when you look at some of the things that George has been was talking about the way to approach noise, the way to approach performance, and so on. We have our ways of doing things to make things more efficient. The goal that we had was we were looking at all of the instruction out there that people have for audiobooks, and some of it was outdated, some of it was based on other categories of work like animation or commercials. And I was finding economies of scale and ways of doing things. It's how I created the stair-step method, which really speeds up the recording, editing, and mastering process, and has helped us lower those ratios of work hours to finished hours. But then people were asking questions about how to deal with ACX in terms of their support, how to deal with rights holders. So I took the messaging templates as an example that I use with my clients, the different messages that I send them throughout the process of working for a rights holder, and compiled them and offered them to the students. And so there's about 100 hours or so of training that covers everything from performance to technology, to production, to marketing and promotion, and to handling the projects and clients that you will encounter on ACX. And again, we've had about 2,400 students go through the course, and they're responsible for an awful lot of books, and we've got some great audio winners and many Audie nominees. And I basically just share in that class what I do to get better and to do better as an audiobook narrator.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I can say one of our previous employees, Ryan Hicks, went through your class and absolutely loved it. Said it was just fantastic. So while it's not my own first person, yeah, fantastic.
There was one somebody asked me, who is it aimed at? And it's aimed at people who absolutely have no idea and may have told themselves some fairy tales about how audiobooks work, because they look at the end product and they figure, oh, somebody's been sitting there for 25 hours doing this work. And then also it's aimed at one other constituency, and those are people who have started down the path of an audiobook narration career and not gotten the satisfaction, the success, the efficiencies that they wanted, because maybe they made some stuff up as they went along. It has to work this way. I need this kind of process. And we kind of hone and refine that sort of thing. And a lot of the things that George was talking about, we have our own way of approaching, and other people have a different way of approaching it. We just feel like our stuff works. So there you go.
Perfect.
It's very holistic, right, David?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One quick follow-up from Rebecca. Is the class taught one-on-one or as a webinar or ...
So in the world of learning design, course design, there's a concept called learning modes. And the best way to do this is to do it in all ways, with text and with pictures and with video and with audio. We drip out the course across an entire month, but you're able to have it whenever you want, and you can take it at your own pace. We do live Q&A at the end of the course, but it's all entirely up to you, and again, you have access to it forever.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Question for George. George, how do you feel about mics being suspended from booth ceilings from anonymous attendee?
That's a funny question. Ask them how they feel about being... No, just kidding. It's fine. I mean, again, when I talk about ergonomics, you may find that in your environment, the best place to put it on your mic is literally mounted from the ceiling. I find that for a lot of people, the ceiling's pretty high when they're seated, so that may not be as ideal. The other problem with the ceiling is there aren't a lot of mounting systems and booms and things that are designed for that. And when you try to adopt one of those tabletop arms or those radio station arms and try to mount in the ceiling, they just don't. That doesn't mean that they don't mount. You can get them to stay up, but they don't work that way. They aren't designed to move around and be adjustable that way. So if you want something that's easy to move and adjust, ceiling mounting is probably not going to be the way to go. Unless you want to spend a lot of money, in which case you can, Yellowtech makes an amazing ceiling mounted pole that then mounts mic. You can mount the mic arm to. If you want to spend $500, $600, $700, mounting a microphone, be my guest. You can get a pretty elaborate system. There is only one kit that I think is sensible. Heil microphones, the Heil mic company, Heil, does have a mounting kit that does work on a ceiling, and it's just a simple boom arm, like a normal mic boom. So it just tilts up and down. But it's reasonably priced. The whole thing maybe is like $70 to $80, and it's reasonably adjustable. You can tilt it up and down and get into a comfortable position. If you're trying to find information on my site, I have a section called Gear Recommendations in the resources area of our georgethe.tech site, and you'll find that on there. So it can work, just it's not ideal for everybody.
If I could jump on that, Adam, whatever you choose to do, you want to make sure that what you're adding to your space, how you're positioning your gear, is that it brings it to you. You don't want to be leaning in to get to your gear, or leaning back to get away from your gear, or off to the side so you can see your screen. I use a mic pop filter that I call the mic sock, and I use it so that I can see my screen very easily, and I can bring my mic close to where I need it to be. It comes to me, and you want to make sure that your gear comes to you, because, man, you don't want to be sitting there for half an hour in a bad posture, adding to all of your other stresses and strains in doing audiobook work, and adding the physical positioning to that. So if a ceiling mount works for you, figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Good answers. Thank you. This question is for both. I'll throw this to George first, from Neil. Where do you sit on the ridiculousness of you? I'm reading by quotation here. Ridiculousness of using RMS and LUFS as a way of measuring the loudness of single voice over silence audio, and how, I'm going to redact the distributor names, and how some distributors apply RMS LUFS settings designed for music onto audiobook recording. Thank you.
I don't know. I mean, in the music production world, we've had what we used to call the loudness wars, which was trying to get the level as loud as possible to be more competitive and, sell more albums, I guess. And it doesn't apply to audiobooks at all. And that's why ACX has a standard to achieve for consistency, to completely eliminate variations, or not all variations, because there is some allowance for variation, but to not have a competition in volume be a part of the equation, right? So different industries for music streaming and platforms all have their own standards. YouTube has a standard. Other systems have standards. We have our own for audiobooks and ACX. So I don't know how that even plays in. It's just we have our own thing, and we stick to our lane when it comes to this.
Yeah, I think that sometimes categories of performance walk into a room where another category of performance is doing their work, and they're going, why aren't you doing what we do? Being righteously indignant about how Spotify or Pandora or even Audible changes the quality, the loudness of what we do. When somebody who is used to using a LUFS standard comes in and starts talking about peak normalization not being the right measurement for what we do, or RMS not being the right measurement. Okay, have a seat, Grandpa. It's like, we do this for a particular reason. Audible has chosen these standards for the exact same reason radio started doing compression way back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. Number one, to overcome environmental noise like kids in the car or road noises, rumble. Most of the listening was done in a car. But also for a very important reason. The more compressed the sound is, the further it will go out transmission-wise, and the more people it will reach. So everybody has reasons for doing what they do. Spotify and Pandora and the other outlets that do this likely don't want to get into the idea of choosing what kind of processing they apply to what streams they offer. They just want to make it easy for everybody. And I think this is one of those categories where you kind of ask yourself, can I change this? Do I have any control over this? Do I need to be spending the emotional currency of being righteously indignant about how they're damaging my work? you know what? I got other things to do. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee.
Good answers. Thank you. Okay. For this isn't directed at anyone specifically, so I can throw it to whoever or both of you if you want to answer. From Michael, how obsessive should I be about stomach gurgles and footfall noise from my family? And as someone with two small children, I can understand the footfall situation.
Yeah.
I'll let you take that, David.
Yeah, I mean, listen, again, I think that we sometimes are our own worst enemies when it comes to breaths and to mouth noise. But I will tell you, when I take a sip of water and the next thing that happens is I start a sentence and then I burp, it's like, oh, Jesus. You can't let that go through. That's different. That's a level of damage to your performance that you need to be aware of. And if you can hear footfalls in your earbuds, and I suggest that you totally ignore, I mean, really, this is like an ironclad rule, totally ignore any coach or performance coach that teaches you not to wear earbuds or headphones because you'll fall in love with your voice. Well, you'll also not be able to hear footfalls or that dog barking that you thought your brain rejects certain things. You can't tell when you overdrive the pickup on the microphone or you get a pop or a hard dental or plosive or a hard vowel unless you're monitoring yourself at the same time. And this notion of, I'm going to fall in love with my voice, I don't want to do that. Why not? Why not? Be your own best fan. It's worked for a lot of people, and it helps you manage your recording process in a way that you can't manage it if you don't wear some sort of ear monitors. It also doubles your work because you got to go back and review everything as opposed to working on the assumption that what you're hearing is what you can fix with pickups on the fly. We teach that in our session. But those are two things that I think you should pay attention to. And you certainly don't want a listener going, wow, what did he just eat? Who's running in the background?
You definitely have to get to know your body, right? You have to know, like, when is your stomach going to go crazy? Like, how should you wait an hour after you eat? Should you not eat those things and all that stuff? It's all part of being a good artist is you know your body, you know your instrument, you know how you react, and you'll be surprised. Yes, the microphone's going to hear some of those body sounds, and you need to know if they're audible by the listener, and that's by listening.
And yet, for those of you who know who Ryan Holiday is, Ryan Holiday used to be the PR person for American Apparel, which is one of the most evil companies ever in existence. He was the guy that made them even more evil on social media. He's currently done a whole series of books on Stoicism. And if you listen to his current books, they're beautifully recorded. Like he has really gone to great lengths to change his performance. Go listen to Trust Me, I'm Lying, which was one of his first books. It sounds like he recorded one of the chapters in a hotel room with the window open. It sounds like another chapter was recorded on a moving train. He didn't give a crap about his quality. And guess what? It was a best-selling book and audiobook. So in the end, there are all these things to balance. I say don't be too precious with your breathing and your mouth noises, but do be aware of things that can take the listener out of the story and correct those on the fly.
Yeah,
Good
that's
answer.
distracting. Mm-hmm.
Okay, we got four more. We have four more questions here. Hopefully this one is a nice, easy one from Patty. I'm assuming this one is for George, but David, step in if you think. What do you recommend for treating the hard flat surface of a remote monitor in the booth?
Well, it's a lot of it's just placement of the display. So if it's like absolutely vertical, plumb, straight up and down, and it's right behind the mic, think about it as a mirror. In fact, this is a trick. You can put a mirror, shaving mirror or whatever, in front of that screen. If you look in the mirror, and the first thing you see is the mic, that's a reflection point. How do you fix it? Really, it's just like I call it avoiding the bank shot in pool, right? You don't want the ball to go in the pocket, right? So you just adjust that reflection point so that the sound doesn't go right back at the mic. It kind of goes off in another direction. And that doesn't require a big adjustment. That can require just turning the monitor 10, 15 degrees to one side or the other, or tilting it up and down a little bit. But in my opinion, that's really all it takes. Just a little adjustment of the placement.
So one thing that you might want to consider is it might not be as big a deal as you think, because mics that have cardioid patterns or hypercardioid patterns are designed specifically to reject sound from behind them. I'm going to switch real briefly to the AT2020 that I have here, and if you'll notice, as I get close to the front of the microphone, you can hear me in full fidelity. If I turn it around to the back of the microphone, all of a sudden it sounds very, very different. And part of that is the pattern that the mic has. It picks up what's in front and rejects what's in the back. So let me switch back to my video mic, my shotgun. So if your microphone has that kind of pattern, it may not be as big of a situation as you might think it is, but it might not. So it's experimentation.
Shotgun mics are tricky. They really are interesting because they look super directional, like they're only going to hear what's in front, right? That's the design. But they also have this weird effect of hearing what's behind them. They have the pickup pattern has a tail. So the back of the mic, if it's pointing at a glass window or anything reflective, can pick up sound bouncing off the back. So that's why cardioid and super hypercardioid mics and stuff tend to be a little simpler to use because they don't pick up as much from what's behind them.
Unmuted myself finally. Okay, we'll go into a couple more questions here. I'm going to answer the first part of this, and then I'll throw to either of you. From Kurt, for projects involving chapters with as in hundreds of subsections or chapters that will be separate MP3 files, do you have recommendations for how to manage that in Pozotron or a DAW? He's currently using Reaper. From a Pozotron perspective, it doesn't really matter. I think it's really up to how you set up your session. We have some people who do it chapter by chapter. We have some people who will just do 1-2 hour chunk of audio based on their recording session. So really doesn't matter. I would say, if it was me, I would say do whatever changes your workflow the least from recording to editing to distribution. That would be my suggestion. But David or George, anything to add?
I don't know what George is going to say, probably from a technical perspective, interesting, very interesting. I'm going to defend the listener. I just hate audiobooks that are hundreds and hundreds of chapters, each one a minute and a half long. It drives me up the wall. And mostly because there are times when I use audiobooks to fall asleep, or I use audiobooks to fill up a certain amount of time before I have another session for Pozotron. I feel like a conversation with your rights holder or with the publisher on how they're going to structure the finished book in a series of sections with chapters within them that flow from one to the other. Give the listener an opportunity to spend some time with you. Every time they turn around, if they have the end of chapter timer selected, or if they have a certain time period selected, or whatever, the notion of, listen, it's up to the rights holder. It's entirely up to the rights holder. But it gets ridiculous sometimes. It really does, especially with technical books, with nonfiction books, or with books that are scene by scene by scene, as opposed to a series of scenes within a chapter. It's a conversation worth having with the rights holder. That's what I'm going to say.
I guess from a technical perspective, I don't really have much of an opinion on it. Whether it's 2-minute chapters, or it's just more of a nuisance to really almost everybody. It's more of a nuisance for production. You have more files to name, you have more files to manage, and et cetera. So obviously it's out of your hands for the most part as a narrator, what you're going to be given. If your workflow is efficient, and whether you learn it through David's methods or one of my methods, the post side of it, or the actual finishing of the files, is so automated that it doesn't even really matter how many files there are. It's just automated.
Yeah. With Audio Cupcake.
Go ahead.
With Audio Cupcake, you can drag and drop one file, or you can drag and drop 100 files, and it'll just take it in serial order. So you can batch process with Audio Cupcake. And so that really doesn't matter. I tend to want to do separate projects for each one of my chapters or each one of my sections. Just makes it easier to manage. I wouldn't put them ever the whole book in one project. That's a little dangerous for me.
Yeah.
And if it's Kurt that's asking the question, he should mention that it's religious text with specific verses that's designed to be in an app. So an app has random access, usually designed into the interface.
Isn't that crossing into e-learning a little bit?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah.
Yeah. And whereas audiobooks tend to be, unless they're reference books, tend to be very linear, very serial in nature. You're laying out a story that has, rises and falls and climaxes and denouements, and you find out who the killer is, things like that. So again, it's worth having a conversation with the rights holder.
Awesome. Quick question for David here. Is ACX Masterclass focused on fiction, nonfiction, or both?
Both. It's everything, including creating your own content, including, doing the narration of your own books. We want this to be an absolute wellspring of information covering everything about what happens. And what you learn here is, we apply to ACX. We teach you how to build a business on ACX. The very last section of the course is called Beyond ACX, how to take what you've learned and use it with the various workflows of, say, the big five, Penguin Random House and Simon & Schuster and Tantor and publishing houses and production platforms and people like Dion and Scribe, and, take what you've learned and adjust the workflow that we've taught you for ACX work to what they expect. So there you go.
Fantastic. Question from Christy. George, when is the passport, I'm assuming that's passport, VO really going to be ready?
That was you snuck that one in there.
Yeah.
We don't know. We don't know yet. Is the really truly honest answer. Thanks, Dan. It's a truly honest answer. We don't know yet. We're at the stage of production. We, meaning Centrance, the company that's going to make it, of getting the prototypes made in China and then shipped back. The circuit boards assembled there, and then they come back to Chicago, where they are hand assembled into the chassis, and then we get to test them out. So I don't know. We could be a month or two from having functional prototypes. So it's going to be a while. And it's a lot longer than we'd expected. So for those of you who did pre-order a Passport VO audio interface from Centrance, you're very patient and we appreciate you.
That was from Christy, and she said, sorry, I got that email update and wanted to ask in person, quote unquote.
No problem. No problem.
Okay. This one is a doozy. From anonymous attendee. Do you think a large share of audiobook customers could be lost to increasingly high quality onboard AI readers like Alexa or different high quality readers freely available when someone buys an ebook? And do you think it's I will give my thoughts, and then you guys are welcome to jump in or avoid the elephant in the room, run away as fast as you can. For me, my belief is there are types of content that will lend themselves more to AI reading than others. Works of fiction, which, as you saw earlier, drive the vast majority or drive, 2/3 of sales revenues, I do not believe will be driven by what will be suited for AI narration, at least for the foreseeable future. AI narration is nowhere near as ready as a lot of these companies are promoting them to be. I was playing around with one of the vendors just as I'm doing, keeping tabs on the industry, and there's still a ton of hallucinations. I was playing around with my kids and trying to get them to announce my son's baseball, now batting for Dunbar, Ethan Fritz. And it started with, I go, blah, 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 like a whole bunch of hallucination at the beginning. So it is nowhere near as ready from a output to the listener perspective or from the production side of things. It is not simply put in a script, press play, and it's perfect. So narrators, don't think that the apocalypse is nigh. It's, these companies will continue to get better. But the vast majority of projects that actually make money, I do not believe will be AI narrated in the foreseeable future. George and David, feel free to.
I don't have an opinion on that, but David.
You don't have an opinion on that? I have some thoughts. So first of all, I say, let's all get over ourselves. It's here to stay. And it's not the first time that it's happened, and I'll get to that in just a second. But I think the basic rule you should consider for the future is the money. Uh, I think most projects that are going to make money will certainly be done by bespoke human narrators that are doing amazing jobs, and bigger companies that are doing these projects will want to, continue to use humans. And the companies that are really think this is the coolest thing ever since sliced bread, the black t-shirt tech crowds, that we are way too old for, they're very excited about how AI is going to like revolutionize stuff, dude. It will in some cases, but mostly not. And you can disagree with me if you want to. I have people who, have been texting me saying, AI is coming for all of our jobs. And I don't know why you guys are spending so much time on showing us how to be great performers when it's all going to be gone. And I think that's kind of a doomsday scenario. But I think with some projects, they wouldn't even be in existence if there wasn't an AI option, because they're not going to make money. Think back catalog on big publishers that don't sell very well, or those summary books that you see, summaries of big bestsellers, those are going to be very quickly done and they don't sell very well. But in general, it's the money. And also, just to remind you, for those of you that do voice work in other categories of work, I've been doing IVR work for over 40 years. I was the voice of America Online and about 150 of the other Fortune 5,000 companies. I continue to do IVR work, even though a form of synthetic voices, artificial intelligence, has been available since the mid 80s. If you remember the movie War Games with Matthew Broderick and the Whopper computer, would you like to play a game? You could understand what the computer was saying. And in those 8-bit voice days, you could understand what your bank balance was at the bank if you called up and they were using one of those rudimentary things. And yet, still to this day, I do IVR work all the time. My clients come to me because they want a better image for their product or their service. So I think that same calculus is going to occur in all areas where AI is being, we're all being warned that we don't have work coming our way anymore as actors. I think that's kind of short-sighted.
I would agree with that. And two more things. One, the business model of a lot of these companies is not yet to the point where my guess is that they're profitable because they're selling it at such a low price. And for me, I would say the longer you listen to an AI voice, if you've done it, the more jarring it gets. So the longer form your content, the less likely, at least in the near term, would be my mind that you're going to get subsumed by AI. And the other part of this question was, do you think it's wise to seek PFH pay over royalty share to protect oneself from the risk of customers flocking to free AI options during the 7-year contract?
I don't. I mean, I'm a big fan of royalty share plus. It pays the vast preponderance of my mortgage every month. Because I've built up a body of work and my rights holders have stuck with me beyond the 7-year limit on the contracts. But also, we were teaching a version of what is called Royalty Share Plus now, which was introduced in 2017 or 2016 by ACX. We were teaching that as hybrid stipend, where if ACX doesn't want to pay the stipend, well, maybe the rights holder is willing to pay the stipend, and here's how to negotiate that. So I think that I wouldn't put all my eggs in one basket over another. The calculus for the rights holder is this will never sell well, so let's do it on royalty share. Oh, this is going to sell great, so let's do this on per finished hour, so I'm not continually paying out money. It's a negotiation between you and your client.
Fantastic. Okay, two more questions. One from Terry and a couple from Cliff that I'm going to combine into one. From Terry, what do you all suggest when we need to adjust mics between standing and sitting? Essentially, I'd like to be standing for VO commercial auditions, but don't want to move the mic from a sitting position once I begin a book for fear of the sound changing. Do I use 2 mics? Do you have any other suggestions?
George, you want to go? Or
I would do
mean, I
2
have
mics.
thoughts.
I would do 2 mics.
Yeah, you can.
Because we don't need expensive mics, right? You don't need two $2,000 mics.
Yeah.
You need two to $500 mics, you know, like so. I think it does make sense to have two mics again because of what I was harping on earlier about consistency. It's a lot harder to nail the placement and consistency constantly if you have to move it up and down and sit and stand. Dave?
I would take a slightly different tack if you're going to use a boom arm and move it between the two. Don't be so precious with the word consistency. You can listen to an audiobook and you will hear differences, wholesale differences in recording quality, in room temperature, not necessarily tone, but just the flavor of what they're doing from chapter to chapter, often included within a chapter in the same space because they've done two different recording sessions and they haven't put things quite where they need to be. But I also think it's hard to hear sometimes any slight difference there. If I were doing it, and I do that, I don't stand for any of my work. And I was glad that, she said, when I want to sit when I'm doing audiobooks, good for you. I sit for everything. I don't stand for anything. If I'm going to a studio somewhere, I'll stand if that's how they have things set up. If I'm going to do something where I have to do body movement, like if I'm doing say I'm doing a spot for shoes for Reebok, and I have to kind of bounce up and down like this so I can get my voice to change as I'm running in something. That's one very strange, and please don't show that video to your kids. Very strange situation. Yeah, you might want to move the mic up, but don't worry too much about not putting it in exactly the right position when you get it back. It's going to be fine. Nobody is going to be sitting there with a report card going, she moved her mic a quarter of an inch. And that's a
I
that's a
mean,
3-star rather than a 5-star.
I'm a bit of a pixel peeper, when it
Yeah.
comes to sound. So I'm listening to it on a very critical level. Listeners aren't mostly listening on a critical level. So, all I say is with a grain of salt. It's taking that audio production side to another level. But the importance of it and how well you book and all that is dubious, and at the end of the day, to be honest. It's really a decision to take it to another level of concern, critical listening. But yeah, one mic on a decent boom arm. There's a lot of good boom arms now. I have them on my recommendations page, gear recommendation. I can easily go from a seated to a standing height with a quick
And if you have
adjustment.
that boom mounted on a motorized desk that you can move from sitting to standing, well, if you set those measurements properly and you stand, you're going to be exactly where you were when you were sitting when it was down lower.
That's
So
what
there's
I
a lot
do.
of ways to skin that cat.
That's actually what I do. I have an electric lift desk with, it has presets. They all have this.
Yeah.
I have one for sitting, two for standing, three for my daughter if she's going to record at my house. That's it.
Yeah.
Easy.
Fantastic. Okay, final questions from Cliff. Number one, are audiobook narrators recording on shotgun mics?
Yes and
Sure.
no. There was a studio that I consulted with years ago that was well known in LA, and they were using all 416 shotgun mics. I was rather surprised.
Sure.
They can. Yeah. I think you really have to, if you really are curious, you really have to try both, use them both, and understand how they sound different, how they behave differently to your movement and all that, to really understand why someone would choose one over the other.
Okay. Are there tips on improving accuracy beyond applying ergonomics?
Accuracy in terms of addressing the mic.
My assumption is, because I'm answering his second part of his question, I think in terms of misreads.
Oh,
Misreads are like word for word accuracy.
don't worry about it. You're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to make lots of mistakes depending upon the quality of the writing, depending upon things that you probably can't control. And if you had any idea how much crap ends up on the floor on an on-camera shoot, how many takes some directors go through when I'm doing on-camera work, and then what you end up seeing on Netflix or you end up seeing on NBC, oh my God, it's crazy. And so part of it is being at peace with the fact that you aren't necessarily going to be able to control how accurate you are. And I wouldn't play that game. taking it
this
to
isn't live announced. This isn't live announced for
exactly,
an
taking it
award
to the
show.
extreme of, oh, I got through that whole chapter without a single mistake. That's not the game to play. The game to play is I got through that whole chapter and man, was that fun. Man, was that perfect in terms of the story. Boy, is that going to be something I'm proud of. Not, I saved the time on the editing on that one. Yeah, baby. That's not the game to play. And the accuracy is going to vary all over the place throughout your career. There are times when you sit down and, as I said, you take a sip of water and then you burp and then it's like, oh, there goes the accuracy on that one. So don't worry about it. Worry about serving the story. Honest to God, that's the metric.
Fantastic. And Christy Burns, thank you very much. Hey, Pozotron catches those mistakes, smiley face, so don't worry about it. Okay, finally from Cliff. Is there any technology that offers real-time misread pickups? Cliff, stay tuned. That is on the Pozotron roadmap. It won't be for everyone, but for someone who wants that real-time feedback, that is on our roadmap to be able to give that real-time accuracy feedback through Pozotron. So stay tuned for that.
New workflows to learn.
Exactly. A ton of big thank yous to David and to George and to Lindsay from my team who pulled all of this together. Thank you very much for your time.
Can I say something?
And David and George, feel free to end us off.
Yeah, I just want to say something real quickly about Audio Cupcake. Everybody's going to get a copy of it. If you'll get an email, tells you where to get it. It's a Mac only piece of software. I'm sorry for those of you that use Windows, but the reason Audio Cupcake was created was because, when Mac OS jumped up to 64-bit, it's the piece of software that we were recommending, which is the Levelator, which happened to do exactly what ACX needed to have done, and it was one of those time savers, stopped working. You couldn't run it on newer computers. And so I got together with a friend of mine. I said, how can we fix a couple of other problems, like spitting out that final MP3 file that you can just upload to ACX and know that it's going to work? And so that's why it's Mac only. And it's drag and drop. It's like it solves the math problem once and for all. You don't have to worry about it. I'm not trying to sell it to you. I'm just saying this is what you'll get. You'll drag your final edited raw WAV file on top of Audio Cupcake, drop it, and it'll spit out the final MP3 file that you can upload to ACX. And I just want to warn you, it only accepts 16-bit 44-100 WAV files because that's what ACX requires that you use. So just wanted to make sure people know that. And also the deadline for signing up for the ACX Masterclass is tomorrow night at 9 p.m. So if you want to take advantage of the private coaching with me, you have to kind of act fast. That's the only thing I wanted to say. And I also wanted to say, George Whittam is a freaking genius. And when he talks to you about technology and he talks to you about the tech side of things, getting that top level domain of .tech couldn't be more appropriate. I've been working with him forever, and he's brilliant. So just enjoy.
Thanks, David. Nice of you to say. Yeah, and anything you want to know about us, we're going to have a landing page for you, as well as David as well. So if you go to georgethe.tech/POZ, you'll see the offers we have for you. We have a coupon code for discounts on really everything, and we have some credit to get access to free content. So yeah, thanks for that shout out, David. Nice to work with you again, as always. And thanks for inviting us in.
It's like we're back at the SAG offices, at the SAG, in the Cagney room.
Yeah. Thanks, Adam. Thanks for everybody having us.
No problem. Likewise. And David, I believe yours is www.acxmasterclass.com/POZ or
not backslash, just slash.
Oh, slash POZ. And you will obviously be getting an email. Everyone will be getting an email very soon, right after this, with those links as well. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining, and have a wonderful weekend.
Bye, everybody.